everybody. This is Raul for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the great honor and pleasure of chatting with three random lumberjacks who we encountered as they were wandering the streets in Albuquerque, New Mexico. No, I kid you. This is the actual faces of people that you have heard, the Jazz Imposters. And of course, we have Andres, Aaron, and Dustin. We have sax, bass, and drums. As always, we'd like to know a little bit of your background, how you got started on your respective instrument, even though we are a bass publication. Why don't I start with you, because you're closest. How did you get started in music and on drums?
Yeah. So I was playing in bands with all my friends growing up on the same, all of my friends on the same street that we lived on in the neighborhood. We were, just experimenting with guitars and rock music and stuff. And I quickly identified myself as the person that was going to buy as much musical equipment as I possibly could just to learn how it all worked. And when I was 14 years old, I eventually bought a drum set because we could never find anyone who owned one to play with us. And as soon as I got those, I was never going to sit at another instrument again. That was it. I had kind of found my instrumental voice. And so, yeah, here I am 17 years later, still learning and still playing the drums. Yeah.
Are you still in the habit of buying tons of stuff?
Yes, I am. That hasn't gone away.
Die hard.
Yeah.
Acquisition syndrome, and drummers too.
Yep.
Same question.
Yeah, so I had a little bit of music in middle school and high school. I played the alto saxophone actually, but for some strange reason I got interested in electric bass. I don't even know if I could have really picked it out of a mix. Picked one up for a few bucks from a friend in high school, and I blew out my dad's stereo playing the Peter Gunn theme. And similarly, it kind of went on from there. I did have this moment sitting in the living room though, where I was playing and I paused as a teenager, and I thought to myself, what will this be like if I keep it up into my 40s? Well, young Aaron, there you go.
When was the last time you played Peter Gunn?
I don't know. It's time to break it out.
Yesterday.
P, there's our P.
Yeah, there we go. It is coming up. I started in elementary school. Didn't want to play the clarinet because clarinets were lame, and there was no saxophone players. So I was inspired by Lisa Simpson and picked up the saxophone and didn't look back. So
there you go.
mine's pretty simple. I also play the Peter Gunn theme song. Sorry.
Well, I think we should do it.
We might have to play Peter Gunn.
For those of you that are paying attention to the podcast, right now we're about mid-alphabet, and hence coming close to the P's. And basically what the Jazz Imposters have been doing have been working their way alphabetically into the depths and the bowels of jazz. How did this idea come about to do something like this?
Yeah, so we all met actually and came to know each other playing in a volunteer big band here in Albuquerque, just with the shared interest of continuing our education in music and learning and getting to play with other musicians and really sort of learning what we'd missed from not going to music school, learning jazz and sort of the history and tradition of that style of music. And eventually that band sort of, flamed out for us, and we kept getting together sort of just as a rehearsal band, not really with any interest in gigging or, writing original tunes, just to keep improving our skills with one another. And eventually we weren't making a ton of progress doing that. We weren't really being held accountable by anyone. So I sort of came up with the idea of maybe recording our whole journey, and that way we would be held to deadlines and actually have to get stuff done. And so that's kind of how it started. I pitched the idea to Aaron one day, and he was very excited about it. I knew Andres would be an easy sell, so because he's always looking to play more, and it sort of took off from there. And so far we've been on the straight and narrow and haven't missed any deadlines yet, despite our many attempts to. And it's been fun.
The accountability is a big part. I remember, I want to say it was probably like our fourth letter, and I was like, Dustin, man, I haven't practiced. And you're like, I don't care. You gotta play.
That's when Dustin texted the police icon.
He was upset. It was definitely. There's emojicons that were in those messages, and just come rain or shine, whether it's practice or not. Hey, we're gonna do the best that we can, and we've actually been able to pull up every single time. So
yeah,
I agree. One thing when Dustin reached out, he said, "Hey, I'd like to get together, have an idea." I thought, oh, it must be a band, or maybe shore up the rehearsal thing. I knew what a podcast was, but I had never imagined participating in one. So when I heard that, it was both intimidating and exciting.
Gotcha. Well, and one of the great things about what you're doing is, I think, conserving and preserving kind of the essence and the skeleton of jazz itself. As jazz is an evolving thing. I like particularly, and Andres knows this, that I'm very fond of kind of more of the old school kind of things, which is a lot of what you guys are doing, and it's kind of reaching into the past. Not to say that current and contemporary jazz is not great, but I still embrace those foundations more because it's less eclectic, it's more for the people, it's more relatable, it has things that can kind of stick in your head versus a collection of disjointed random sounds that, yes, everybody knew and everybody played in their time, but these classics, and I'm hoping that people that have the opportunity to hear the podcast will also start kind of perking up and have interest into this classic part of jazz as one of the, and I've been corrected, I used to call it the only American music form until I was corrected by Reggie Workman that the Native Americans have music as well, so we can't
ignore that.
He's like, it's more of an African American music form, that they were so on the edge of jazz back in the Coltrane days and all of that stuff. So choosing the classic edge, how did you guys decide to do that more? And I know it's tricky because you have to skim the edges without getting really into the copywritten part of it.
Yeah. So I think the motivation was just that, we're all fans of contemporary jazz as well. Like, I think that's more where our tastes lie. Andres is a huge fan of like neo soul and R&B, and Aaron loves fusion and stuff and I'm the same way. I enjoy more contemporary sort of progressive music forms. But there's a bridge between that classic jazz to there that we hadn't really walked across. And so I think that's why I felt like it was important that we sort of go back and do sort of an informal, formal education of this history. And that's kind of what it's turned into, is more of a history lesson than anything, and as well as developing our playing slowly but surely. And so, yeah, just to sort of pay our respects and deepen our understanding of the tradition.
Some of even the history, and I think our episode on G was Goodbye Pork Bite Hat, and I've played that song a ton of times, but I never knew any of the history behind it or what I didn't know what a pork pie hat really was. It was like a hat or a pork, I don't know, whatever.
Is it a kind
just
of soup?
Yeah, it could be, and he's really fond of it. But understanding the history really allowed me to kind of play better, knowing the emotional aspect of that song, and some of those even classics, older songs from, we played a few that are pretty old. There's some really interesting history that even spanned into time. I Got Rhythm was a really interesting, super old song that is still played almost today with the changes.
Yeah, and I think of the real book as such an entry point for learning.
Which one? 1 through 8?
Yeah, which one? Yeah. The last time I took a class, there was just one to get it. You had to get it through the teacher. But it's kind of an entry point. It's sort of the canon, right? I know we're missing so much, but I just have one real book, not 8, right? Yeah. There's so much out there. But as we move through it, what's cool is that there's so many things bubbling up that I had no idea about, whether they're musicians or composers or records. We went as a group to see the Blue Note documentary. It's just so vast, and it can be intimidating. So that's where I want to echo that it's nice to have the structure, because we kind of keep each other going despite either it's intimidating or we kind of lose a little steam or whatever.
Gotcha.
It's really neat.
Well, and you're standing on the shoulders of some giants, especially when you're looking at some of these players. I think it's important for the public to know this just didn't happen. This was a whole process, and in many cases it was a struggle to be able to make these things happen. One of my favorite stories with Reggie Workman was how for them to get venues to play, they would find an old piano and clean it up and tune it and take it to the owner and say, we'll give you a piano if you'll let us play on Fridays and Saturdays. Because there weren't places for them even to perform. And then these cats would do their gigs, and then get together at a coffee house with Monk and Coltrane and then talk philosophy. You know, a part of it was like, how your gig went pretty good today? Yeah, well, let's talk about this thing. You know, what are you thinking about? And so there's so much more depth to it, but they had to cover this ground and they had to build on it. And now you guys are bringing that forward, so it's very exciting. And you're on a bi-weekly schedule?
Yeah, that's kind of, I mean, thankfully Aaron committed us to that because I was a little more ambitious from the outset, but seeing as how much
Look, dude.
seeing as how much work it's taken us, and we want to do these tunes justice, you know, so we don't want them to ever feel rushed or to not really at least have some idea of what we're putting into these songs or what was put into them when they were written. So 2 weeks has kind of just worked out to be the perfect amount of time where we can, you know, each individually sort of research what interests us about the tune, and then if we need to get together and go over a few things or rehearse it or talk about, you know, what we're gonna try and tell the audience, you know, like sort of come up with our format and all that kind of stuff. It just takes a little bit of extra time maybe than a standard podcast would, but I think it definitely improves the product in the end. So
There's some songs I wish we had 3 weeks.
yeah.
4 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm
or
going,
a
oh, I'm not
lifetime.
ready yet.
Right,
I have been getting a little self-conscious lately because, you know, it hasn't been coming as quickly. I'm really learning, right? I'm still learning a whole bunch of theory. I'm still orienting myself. I'm still gaining facility on my instrument big time. But I did take pause because one of the things that I learned through all this exercise was that, hey, people take this very seriously as a real art form. That's not something that's just old, but that continuously develops. And there's a vanguard for it now. We went to see a show at the Outpost here in town. I told Dustin like midway through, like, this is the first time I felt a pulse in the song. Like, it was so out there I couldn't really wrap my head around it. But then I thought to myself, well, of course, not even in a year of doing this bi-weekly episodes am I gonna like get an art form. It's gonna be something that's always out of reach, always changing, always, you know. And so I kind of gave myself a break. Like, this is a big thing that we're encountering, and you know, that was the whole point of the podcast. Like, we're going to do it on our own terms. So this is where we are.
Gotcha. Well, I kind of think of it like Picasso's work. And for people, most people, when you think of Picasso, you think of a lot of his Cubist kind of things. But we went to the Picasso Museum in Barcelona and saw that he's actually done a lot of conventional art. Regular kind of portraits, landscapes, and other things. And you're kind of going, well, he can paint. I just thought he couldn't do shit. Right. And then, you know, it just turned out this way and then called it art. But no, he could do all these things. And he had spells where he worked in ceramics and he had, you know, worked in watercolor and all this. And so I look at modern jazz as kind of that cubist pushing that envelope and kind of going, yeah, we can play the landscape, we can play the other stuff that you're so used to, but we're reaching for that extra little bit. We're going to do this extra little thing. And unfortunately, I think it is captured by other musicians. Like, you could be in the audience and you go, wow, look, what's that? But you'd get a lay person and it might just, you know, fly right over their head. The same way with Picasso stuff. They're like, whose kid's been drawing on this canvas? And why'd you let him do that? So looking ahead, I know we're halfway through the alphabet, and there's actually songs that go with Z's and X's and things.
We'll put a Z in front of it and just to make it fit.
Actually, there's got to be, right?
Strange spellings.
Right.
Yeah.
Somebody's written a song called X-Ray. It's out there. We just gotta find it.
It's just not a standard yet.
Not yet.
There you go. And then what happens when you complete the alphabet?
Yeah, so I mean, we've kind of already been ruminating on sort of the next phase of this project. You know, I'm not even sure if we thought we'd make it as far as we have, but you know, we have. You know, I speaking for myself and what we've discussed so far, I know we have other aspirations for, you know, things ways we'd like to expand our content to focus on other areas of music and education and what's going on locally. We've recorded some episodes that have been reviews for movies and concerts, and we want to do more of that. And more than anything, as much as this is just slowly starting to take off now, we'd love to start interacting with listeners and make this more of a communal thing. You know, that I think has been one of the biggest goals from the outset, is trying to make it a platform of musical education that everyone can interact with on. That's kind of the cool thing about where we are with technology in the past 5 or 10 years. Like musical education on the internet has really exploded, and it's been awesome, but one of the things I feel like is lacking that is something we're trying to capture is sort of musicians playing together, other instruments playing together, and sort of turning that into an educational environment as well, and that whole experience, because that's what it's all about anyway, So yeah, we have other plans for the future. We'll see how many of them come to fruition.
Yeah.
Right now, our goal is basically just getting through the alphabet one round,
Right.
and then we may go back and do it again, or we may branch out and do some other things. But for now, we're just enjoying this process, getting sort of our feet wet in the whole environment.
And in our intro episode, we did say, like, look, we're in it for improving our own musicianship, learning something. But part of the mission from the beginning was, let's wrap in the what's going on locally, and then have as many guest musicians as we can. I think just figuring out the podcast and getting our own stuff together for the first half of the alphabet was pretty challenging. We did that a few times. But between now and the end of the alphabet, I'd like to work on that some more. We have some people we know already who are willing to come and join us for particular podcasts, and a few other feelers out there. So I hope to even kind of like really meet the mission in the second half more fully than we've done so far.
Got you. And so that people can find this, I'm going to have you tell me where's the best place to look, because I know you guys are on iTunes, but also with the community stuff. So where do we look?
Yeah, the podcast is available virtually anywhere you get your podcasts now. Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, all those places. We've just kind of slowly started getting our social media up and running, but we're on Facebook, the Jazz Imposters podcast. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. And you can reach us at any one of those places. And we're eager to hear from people and what they think and what they want to hear more of, and all their thoughts and on what we're doing.
Maybe not all their thoughts.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm hoping also that if people see this, they know that they can go back and start from the beginning.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the timeless characteristic of having something like this, is they can maybe have heard M and go, well, hey, whatever happened on A, B, and C or something. So they might go back. So now you know where to find it. Folks, you've seen them here. Faces behind the voices of the Jazz Imposters. Find them on all of their social media and wherever you get your podcasts. Andres, Aaron, Dustin, coming to you on Bass Musician Magazine.